Well, welcome to Contact Sport. I'm Paul Kennedy. John Barker is an AFL assistant coach who's worked at St Kilda under Ross Lyon. This year he was at Hawthorn, the last club to beat Collingwood. I interviewed him about tactics ahead of the grand final. John Barker, thanks for joining me. What part will emotion play in this grand final?
Look, when the siren starts, I think both teams will be at their best, and emotion will probably drizzle away pretty quickly. But, you know, with St Kilda, there's a little bit bubbling about. Doc Baldock's pretty crook, and he's obviously an old legend of the club and been so emotional over the last few years, especially about, you know, wanting the club to have another premiership. And you've got Jack Barker, Trevor's father, who's obviously died recently, and the funerals during the week. So there's a little bit of emotion floating around at the moment. But 5 minutes into the game, I think it'll come down to structures and you know, attitude and intensity.
What I want to talk about is the press and what people call the press or zone defence. You would have worked with Ross Lyon in the past as an assistant to him. Can you tell me how that's evolved in the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, obviously Hawthorn started the press, or the Clarko's cluster. It was called a few different things, and it was a little bit more static when it first started, and teams tried to handball through it.
Yep.
But what happens when teams try to handball through it is it collapses pretty readily, and turnovers are created quickly. But teams have been a little bit smarter at being able to kick through it. But as it's evolved, St Kilda and obviously Collingwood have been the best exponents of it this year, and they've added a new dimension. Their midfields squeeze in tighter into the forward 50. They shut off short outlets really well,
yep.
So it forces those longer kicks, and you're continually seeing vision of teams coming out of their back 50, kicking long because the short outlets are covered, and you know, the Saints' defence, Sammy Fisher, Sammy Gilbert are just taking uncontested marks.
So with Hawthorn's was particularly guys guarding space, and now they're moving more. Is that right? They're quick to try and intercept, or what? Are they getting more players in smaller areas?
There's no doubt about that. What's happened is Hawthorn's players had a space to guard, and as obviously opposition came through that space, they were to check them reasonably tightly, but they're basically waiting for the play to become a live play. So as soon as the handball started, they could collapse in. But what the Pies and the Saints do very well now is they close in on those short outlets. They don't allow easy outlets within or around the source where the ball is, and that forces them into longer plays.
And then they try and force a turnover and rebound as quickly as they can, as we saw with Collingwood the other night. They were expert at it in the first quarter particularly. Outstanding.
As soon as they turn it over, it's helter-skelter. They take the game on. They've got midfielders who are very quick, who burst as soon as they get the ball, and they know that they're going to get good, strong contests forward of the play. They've got some strong targets up front. Now, the first goal they kicked it was a rebound from Harry O'Brien. I think we've got a still picture at the moment. We've got a freeze frame of just how the ball was turned over, because Geelong used to be able to squeeze it out, but that looks vastly different to Hawthorn's zone a couple of years ago, doesn't it? Yeah, you're exactly right. What happens is within, I guess, 70 to 80 metres of where the ball is, especially when it's a stagnant play, you know, it's held up from a free kick or a mark. They really squeeze in, and any options that are short of that play are covered, and it basically forces them long down the line. They get numbers there, and as you said, they just rebound so quickly. Well, let's talk about the way Collingwood moves the ball in contrast to St Kilda, and the talk about Collingwood going wide. Why do they go wide all the time and go through those flanks? Well, they've traditionally done that. Mick Malthouse is obviously a big believer that if you use the flanks, it's a lot easier to defend. This is an example where they had almost a perfect
quarter last week, but they did kick into that so-called fat side once and they paid the price. Is that what they try to avoid?
Yeah, that's a prime example of a hard play to defend. Now they're going forward, and you think, well, why should they be thinking of defending when they're attacking? But that play, as you said, they kick it over to the open side, or the fat side that it's called, and there's no density behind that play, so Geelong were easily able to transition that and score from it.
So when Collingwood goes in, they're thinking about the ball coming out already. Yeah,
look, that's their mindset. Mick's always played that way, but what's made that even stronger this year and sort of certainly late last year was the fact that this press, the squeeze, has taken even more space out of the opposition to be able to transition from their defensive 50 against the Pies.
What about St Kilda then? Are they more likely to switch the ball to the other side of the ground and come through the middle? Yeah,
they do take more risks in terms of switching the play, changing direction with the ball. You see an example there, Nick Riewoldt. They go to the fat side inside 50. They do take a little bit more risk in terms of the angles and the change of direction they use, but they're more composed with the ball.
Yep.
They will hold on to the ball. They do like taking time out of the clock. They do like holding the ball so that the opposition can't get it in their hands. And that's another ploy that does frustrate teams that especially like time in possession, and the Pies like time in possession. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I think we've got an example here from the St Kilda and what part its backline plays, and another example of what you're talking about. So do they try and get loose men all of the time or just some of the time? I think there's a couple of turnover goals here from the third quarter last week.
Yeah, you just see Sammy Fisher. He's provided numerical advantage behind the play for the Saints. They do like doing that all the time out the back of stoppages. They try and get a spare or numerical advantage, as they call it. And if they can't get that, the likes of Brendan Goddard, who will play in the midfield, he will get back and sweep very quickly as soon as he knows that they've lost the ball and the opposition's starting to transition and they look dangerous.
Well, this is an interesting build-up, and it takes a while. But how will Collingwood try and combat this sort of play here, where St Kilda just hold on to the ball until they get an opportunity to go into their forward 50?
You see just there, he had a fair bit of space to go to, Zach Dawson, and there's another piece of space for St Kilda to transition through. The Pies won't give them that space.
Yeah.
As we saw that still before, they squeeze down the ground. That, the press, as it's called, comes in, shuts down those areas of space that are dangerous, which opposition teams like to transition through, and they just don't allow that, which will force these sort of plays to be a bit longer,
yep.
which means that their defence will get a chance to spoil, and then they can rebound if they're good enough at ground level, which they are very good at ground level.
And St Kilda's not ranked in the top 2 or 3 in rebound at goals running out of 50. Is that right? Is that where they're not so dangerous?
Yes, their ability to transition the full length of the ground is probably in the bottom half of the AFL. So they're not known for their movement, and you just see in that piece of play there they love controlling the ball.
Yep.
But they're going to find that hard when the Pies shut down that close in range space.
And that one led to a Riewoldt goal. Let's talk about Nick Riewoldt now as St Kilda's major weapon. How do you see that playing out, and who's going to go to him?
Oh, look, I think what they're going to do is try a number of guys on him. He's probably too hard to take one-on-one for a full 4 quarters for any one individual defender, because his work rate's outstanding. Obviously, I was lucky enough to coach him for a couple of years there, and there's not too many guys I've seen who have the ability to run themselves and hurt themselves as much as he does.
Yep.
He's a super dangerous talent. I think Presty will probably go to him first, but he will get help from the likes of Reid and Maxwell. I think Maxwell's mindset will be that he'll need to help out whoever is playing on Riewoldt, and you'll find that he's third up quite a bit, as was a lot of the Geelong defenders last year. They obviously had a strong focus on getting over and helping with Nick Riewoldt contests.
What about a weapon for Collingwood? As I see it, might be the rotations. They use the bench like nobody else that I've seen. At one stage last week, they interchanged 4 players at once.
Yeah, they've been the innovators in that area. They obviously, when they need a rest, they come off, and they come off quickly, and they get a spell. And they're such a strong, dynamic, bursting type of speedy, powerful type of midfield that they need rest. And so when they need rest, they come. And often you see when a goal's kicked or a stoppage occurs near the boundary line, 4 come off, 4 come straight back on. It's they rest and recover, and they get back out there and keep bursting.
Is that something that that other teams try to plan against? Is there a system where Collingwood use the rotations to try to free up the player coming on?
Well, I think Dane Swan does that better than any other midfielder, especially for the most dangerous midfielders. He's the best at it. He averages 4 rotations a quarter now. It's very hard to orchestrate. If you're playing on a guy like him, it's very hard to orchestrate the tagger coming off at the same time.
Yeah.
You can generally get him off at the same time, but it's almost impossible to get him back on at the same time. And he's also very good at changing his positions. He will go forward and take his tag forward and be dangerous in front of goals, and he'll also go and play in the defensive half and give the Pies a bit of coverage behind the ball as well. So he's very hard to tag.
What about St Kilda's advantage then, as you see it? Do you think they'll try and utilise stoppages and try and really clog the game up? Is that the only chance they have of dominating Collingwood?
I think that's obviously a strategy that they'll use. They're a very good stoppage team. They've got got the big bulls in Lenny Hayes, who is so good in tight, and he's the type of guy that can just drag a game along, by his own 2 hands, if need be. And Brendan Goddard's obviously a strong player in stoppages, and you've got a little bit of class just outside the stoppages in Del Sano and Lee Montagna, who can obviously transition from stoppages. But yeah, I think the Saints are going to need to get it in close and in tight, and obviously the Pies want to get it outside and burst and use their speed and power.
Now, very briefly, wrapping up, you worked with Ross Lyon for a couple of years. You've also been with the Hawks, the last team to defeat Collingwood. How do you see it playing out, and give us a margin?
Oh, look, I think it's going to be a little bit tighter game than people think. Everyone's jumping on the Pies, and I think the Pies are the stronger team at this point in time. But if there's one team that can beat the Pies at the moment, outside of Hawthorn, obviously, I think it's the Saints, because their defensive action is so strong. They've had the least points against for the whole year in the AFL. Defensively, they're strong, but if the Pies get it played in their half enough, I think they've got the power to score and score well. So I think it's going to be the Pies, and I think it's going to be by 3 or 4 goals.
That's John Barker's take. Enjoy the big game. Thanks for your company.